Good evening. Welcome to Manuscript Monday. It's happening. And it's about 5 minutes. See, we got a lot of people on so far and a lot more people coming. Apparently, if you're the old line is if you're not early, you're late. So you're early, which means you're not late. And we're going to get to Leon in just a little bit. Good. Leon, your camera does work, right? You just didn't turn it on.
I didn't turn it on yet.
Okay, good deal. Just checking. Just checking. Did you guys get a lot of rain down in your neck of the woods?
We did until about 2 o'clock.
Oh, really? It came down hard? Yeah.
It did, and we thought we were going to get it all day, and then it kind of ended it too.
Wow.
So,
Yeah, I thought it ended here too. The prediction on the Delaware on it this weekend was nothing now, but it was going to go up about 8 feet over the next couple of days if all the rain runs off and goes into the river. So we'll go paddling. We'll try to go paddling this weekend when the river be back up again. It should be good. You know, it's good. So a few minutes, we'll start up, get everybody going. People are starting to roll in. Thanks for joining us. Let's see who's here. We got some ISA friends there. We got some folks from the Numismatic Association. We got some Society of American Archivists folks there. We got Manuscript Society people, and we got some folks from the International Society of Appraisers, which is all the folks we reached out to. So we're going to have ourselves a good time. We'll end up right at 9 o'clock, and Leon's going to pack it in with fun and games for the next hour. Well, maybe not fun, maybe not games, but, but it's always a delight. It's just great too.
Oh, it'll be fun and games. It'll be fun.
Yeah, you always make it fun. You always make it fun and interesting, which is just great. I'm glad you could do this. Thanks so much. Got a lot of interest in it. A lot of interest. There we go. If you're just joining us, welcome. We expect close to 100 people on this one this time around, which is always great. Let me do a chat here to everybody, our audience. There we go. There we go. Good deal. All right. Hey, I got 8 o'clock. We're going to kick this off. Thanks for joining us for Manuscript Monday on a Tuesday. Hope you had a great Labor Day. Or if you're not from the States and you're checking in from the rest of the world, yesterday was Labor Day in the United States. It may be Labor Day other places too. Everybody has different Labor Days, I guess. And forward to having our Manuscript Monday on a Tuesday. It's Reading Silver, presented by Leon Caster, who is a certified appraiser, specialty in silver and appreciable residential contents. And we're going to get to him in just a little bit. If you have questions, there are plenty of ways to reach out to me. I just sent you something in your chat box. You have a little GoToWebinar control panel there. You can raise your hand. There's a spot to raise your hand. There's a spot to type into the chat box or ask questions, which you can do. We're going to hold questions regarding silver and Leon's presentation towards the end. But if you have some tech questions, I've just sent you my cell phone number, and I'm going to ask you to text to that number. Don't call it because I can't pick up because I'm running a webinar. My name is Brian Cathenis. I'm the host, a former trustee of the Manuscript Society and still an active member. And I'm delighted to host this every month for anybody who has an interest in collectibles or learning a little more about what's going on in the world of antiques and unusual things. So with that in mind, I'm going to move on to my next slide and tell you and welcome you to what's going on here. So who's sponsored by the Manuscript Society, which is a not-for-profit organization that's been around for many, many years, educating folks about manuscripts and historical documents and preserving them. Educational material available. We always welcome new members. We have an annual conference, and we have monthly like this one too. Why a webinar? It's the easiest and fastest way to reach so many people all across the world. Last month, we had our Manuscript Society Summer Beach Party, and someone from Scotland joined us who said, you know, it's 3 o'clock in the morning here, but I really want to be part of this. So people join in from all over the world. Why now? Why not? We do them the first Monday of every month, unless there's a holiday, and then we'll do it on a Tuesday. Who was invited? Manuscript Society members and their friends. We reached out to several appraisal organizations, invited them to join us. The Society of American Archivists received an announcement. We reached out to the currency and numismatic collectible organizations. I reached out to one of the big stamp organizations, the appraisal organizations, and just our friends that Leon and I know through our Value This with Brian and Leon radio show, which was a nationally syndicated public radio program that went out to about 200,000 listeners every month. So that list was also made available. So we have a lot of people on tonight. What are we going to cover? I'll tell you about that in just a little bit. And I'll also tell you in just a little bit where you can get more information about reading silver, how you can reach out to Leon, and then more about the Manuscript Society. With that in mind, here's what we're going to cover. Leon has written this up. We're going to talk a little bit about silver and how to identify those silver marks, the ones that don't seem to make any sense, whether it's foreign or domestic. Leon is incredibly entertaining. He's a superb instructor. He's taught on the college level for many years. He's run webinars for thousands and thousands of people all across the country, actually all across the world. And he's also an appraisal theory. So he's going to cover all of those things, and you don't have to be a silversmith to be able to understand it. And let me tell you a little bit about Leon and what he's up to. He's been my business partner for close to 30 years, maybe more. He's a certified appraiser, and he's the senior partner at National Appraisal Consultants. His specialty is more and more things every day. He was originally a generalist and spent a lot of years in the auction business, which was a family business, and he's become a specialist in many areas, including appraisal theory and methodology. One of his specialties is obviously silver, and he's been used and has done work for a lot of organizations: Canadian Cultural Property Export Review Board, Department of Homeland Security, Marshal Service. He provides appraisals on a regular basis for a variety of governmental organizations across the world, including the IRS and federal and state courts. He shares his knowledge. He does it very well. I know you're going to enjoy it. And I'm delighted to introduce Leon Caster. So with that, we're going to switch screens here, which is going to take me just a second to do, but that's what's coming up. So Leon, I'm going to make you the presenter. If I can, change presenter. Come here. Let's go with this right here. Gotta go somewhere else. Don't go away. I gotta find this. Where are you? Attendees. There you are. All right, let's go to 3 staff. I'm gonna make you the presenter now, and then you get the screen, and I will turn off my camera and let you do those things. Okay, what I see is your slide that says reading silver, how to identify those marks, and I see your National Appraisal Consultants reading silver thing. So with that, I am going to turn my camera off, and I'm turning over to Leon Castner.
Okay, good. Hope you can hear me. As soon as Brian gets turned off, you'll be able to see the rest of the screen, I hope. And let me see, Brian, if you don't turn yourself off, I'll try to turn you off. Do you think you can do it? Hey, Brian, can you turn your screen off?
I did get rid of my screen. What I see is your screen, Leon. I see you reading silver. I see your screen. It says National Appraiser Consultants reading silver. That's the screen that's up now.
Okay.
All
Okay.
right.
I see your
You probably
face
can't.
right in front of me. So,
Really? Oh, well, I just turned myself off, I thought so.
well, that's okay. As long as you can hear me and see the screen, we're fine.
Good deal. If anybody can't, raise your hand, but you should be able to see Leon's screen that's titled Reading Silver, and I should be out of the picture, and
Okay.
hopefully I'll be offline as far as being quiet as
Okay.
well.
Good. I think we're good now. So thank you, Brian. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks for the nice words. And all that, and I'm going to try to squeeze it into an hour, almost impossible. However, I'd like you to, and I say this in all sincerity, I'd like you to relax. I'd like you to sit back and just kind of be a sponge and take this in. You can certainly take notes, but this could be a very academic, dry time, or it can you can sit and listen and go, well, that was interesting. I really thought that was pretty good. And so I'd rather that it be the latter. I'd rather you sit back and kind of enjoy this, listen. This obviously is not going to cover everything you ever wanted to know in silver. It's just too much material. But I'm going to pick some highlights, and if nothing else, refresh some things in your memory. And this may, by the time we're done, it may say, gee, I really knew more than I thought I did, or I picked up a tip or two. So this is kind of a layperson's guide to silver, but more than that, it deals with markings because this is dealing with the Manuscript Society and you're dealing with letters on paper. I thought if we transport this to silver and say this is about letters on silver, silver has identification marks on it, and if you know what they mean them together, then you can read the document, you can understand what the piece is and what it's all about. So I want to share with you some tips in terms of how to actually read silver. Now, the first mark you see on the screen right there is a series of, it looks like different marks. And it starts with the MK 1834, there's an 84, then there's a glob that who knows what that looks like, and then there's more initials there. Now, if you know what this is, raise your hand. If you know exactly what this means, raise your hand. And if you've raised your hand, you can now leave the webinar because we're not going to learn any more than this. Okay, if you know what this is, then please leave because you're going to embarrass me and everyone else because there's a ringer in the crowd. By the time you're done, however, I hope when you see a mark like this, you'll at least know what you think it might be and where you might go to find the answers. Okay, fair enough? Let's start at the beginning. The beginning is the fact that when we deal with silver, we are dealing with something that is intrinsically different than other material. Silver is a precious, it's not a previous metal, it's a precious metal. And a precious metal, when we say the word precious, it really means that it has intrinsic value, that it doesn't have to be formed into anything to be worth something. Why? Because society has deemed it so from historical times. We've allocated value to things like gold and to silver and other metals and stones. And so when those items, they have a value before they're even formed into. And so that's one of the reasons people want to form them into articles, because they already have a value. So by forming them into an article, they either have more value, or if times are rough and you need to get money, you need to get some kind of or some kind of something to use in the marketplace, you'll always have that intrinsic metal. You can then melt it down, you can pound it down, you can trade it for something else just because it's what it's made out of. Now, you have to think that way when you think with silver, which is different than the way you think when you think of paper. It's different than you think of furniture, china, glass. You see, those things don't have basically intrinsic value. So you don't have to have like this double edged mind. But with silver, you do, because it's always in the background is the fact that silver is made out of something that has value. And that value changes daily based on the market forces. Now, we're not going to get into that, and I'm not going to share how you figure out how much an ounce, a silver spoon might be. But I mean, there's a whole branch of that, figuring out how much does a silver spoon, how much does it weigh, what's it worth today versus what's it worth tomorrow or the next day. Just want to keep that in mind, that silver, because it is made out of intrinsic metal, which becomes its strength and it becomes its downfall. And the reason it becomes its downfall is that throughout history, whenever there's an economic problem, you see the silver, whether it's silver, gold, you see there's always the chance of it disappearing, of it being melted down and used for something else, used for currency. Countries have used silver and gold as a basis for currency, for trade. And so therefore, that is a problem with silver. We'll see it disappears through certain times and then reappears. It's just the nature of the thing. Now, when you take silver, it's mined as nuggets like gold. Okay, so it's mined, and when it's mined in nuggets, basically what happens is it is pounded down to kind of like a flat sheet of aluminum foil. So if you can think of a roller of aluminum foil, then it comes off, and then tradesmen would take that, you see, and they're able to take the raw material in that more usable shape, and then they'll form it into whatever they want. So, and silver being relatively easy to work with, it's kind of what we call soft, okay, is that they can take silver and they can bend it, they can shape it, they can put it around a form, and so they can make it into a shape. And when it's done, it has a pleasing appearance. We like the way silver looks. And that's why we call it silver, because of the silver appearance. And it's considered valuable, just even if it's made poorly, it still has a value in and of itself. Now, whenever we look at silver, the word sterling comes to mind. And the reason the word sterling comes to mind, and you say sterling silver, is the fact that the word sterling means, if I just went to a dictionary and said and look up sterling, it would say pure, it would say honest, it would say integrity. And so when I talk about sterling silver, it basically means it's pure. Now, it's not 100%, because when silver 100% is too soft to actually use. So sterling is the point we've decided is the perfect mixture of pure silver and some other kind of metal to make it usable, to make it hard, but to make it still pleasing and to carry as much of the value as it possibly can. So traditionally, sterling, that amount has been deemed to be 92.5%. So if an article is sterling, it is 92.5% pure silver, or has 92.5% silver in it. Now, that standard has been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. It isn't something that developed 75 years ago. So the word sterling, you see, whenever we hear the word sterling, it means basically it's pure, it's got at least 92.5%. Now that can be marked 92.5, 925, or it could be marked sterling. Any of those indications, any of those markings mean that is indeed silver. Now the interesting thing, let's get close to home real quick. Let's go to the United States. And I don't usually start with the United States. I usually start with Britain because they've been around a heck of a lot longer and they mark their silver longer than we did. But let's go to the US quickly. In the United States, okay, when we started around the time of the independence, we started making currency. And the currency, we use copper, and we also used silver. And the silver that we used when they made silver in terms of its weight and in terms of what a piece of silver would represent, the silver content was 90%. It wasn't 92.5%. It was 90%, a little bit less than sterling silver. And so the coins that we made in America were 90% silver. We had no marking in the United States. We didn't have any trades like they did in England. We didn't have any rules or regulations in terms of how to mark pieces that were made out of silver. Pretty much anything went, anything goes. But we knew that the silver in our coins, you see, was good silver. So that if I had a silver coin, I was guaranteed that the face value of the coin, I had that much in silver. So that became known as coin silver. I have coin that is made out of silver. And since the articles of silver were made out of the basic mixture that the coins were, then when you made flatware, spoons, forks, knives, or tea sets, it was made out of the same composition here in America as our coins. And so therefore we began to call that material coin silver. We didn't use the word sterling. We used the word coin. So you will see on early pieces of silver, usually on the back, it will say the word coin, or it will say pure coin, or it'll have some kind of marking about coin, which means basically it's 90% silver. It wasn't until 1870 in America that we changed and went over to sterling, and sterling was 92.5%, which I've told you before. That was late in the game, 1870. And the law actually about marking silver didn't come in America until 1907. So what we see then in the late 1700s into the 1800s, most of the silver made in America is made out of coin silver, that 90% mixture. And it will often be marked coin or pure coin, but sometimes it's not marked at all. And we'll get into that, why it's not marked at all in a second. In America, you see, we didn't have trades like they had in England. We didn't have an apprentice system like they had in England. We didn't have guilds. We didn't have town assay markings and registrations. And so therefore, pretty much silversmiths here in America would take the silver and they would just make an article and they would sell it. And there was no marking required on it. And what we did instead is they were proud of the work, and so they would put their name on it. And so they would get a little like a punch, and they would put usually their initials or their last name, and they would have a punch of their initials or their last name. And when they made an article, they would then punch it, usually in the bottom or a place that wasn't too noticeable. They would punch it and would say, okay, that was a piece that I made. So for example, Paul Revere had a punch that said Revere. Okay, it was one punch that had his whole last name on it. When he was done with like a teapot, he would then punch the bottom of the teapot, Revere. It was a silver teapot, but there's no markings on it at all indicating that it's silver. So that tends to be a problem because someone can look at it and say, gee, I wonder if it's 90% silver, 92.5%, I wonder if it's something else. Well, that's something that you just have to wonder about. And so we do check early American silver, and sometimes you have to test it chemically to make sure that it indeed is silver. But the absence of a marking of silver doesn't mean anything. And again, it wasn't until 1907 when the law came into effect that the articles made of sterling silver had to be marked sterling. So that was 1907. There were, particularly in the 18th century, is the American silversmiths began to mark their pieces of silver. And the reason they marked it out of jealousy. They marked it out of jealousy because England, you see, all the silver coming from England is marked quite extensively, which we're going to get to in a minute. So the public felt that because it was marked so well, the English pieces, they were better than the American ones. So the American silversmiths and American silver companies decided, well, we better mark our stuff something just to show that it's on the same level. So you'll see all kinds of weird marks on American silver in the 19th century, none of which correspond necessarily to the English markings. If it's marked sterling and it's an American piece, then usually it indicates it's of the latter half of the 19th century or even the 20th century. Now, let's go to England, because England, I like to use England as the prime example because they mark things really well. And if you understand English markings, that's at least half the battle here. The English hallmark system has been in place for 500 or 600 years. They have had silver guilds for a long, long time. And the law in England, in terms of marking a piece of silver, goes back to 1544. And it said that if an item was silver, was good silver, in other words, sterling silver, if it was of that content, then they could mark their silver what's called the lion passant. And the lion passant usually looks like a lion on its hind legs. So the lion is either standing up on its hind legs with his tail furled in the back, or it is a lion on all four legs kind of pouncing forward. The key is the lion. The lion means this is a sterling piece. And you didn't just put that on because you felt like putting it on and you wanted to fool somebody. It had to go down to the town hall, you see. And the town hall assayed it and said, okay, you can put that mark on it. So if that mark is on it, it's a guarantee that this piece is sterling silver. Good silver, 92.5% pure. So that's the first mark. If you see a lion passant on it, that marking on a piece, number one, it's probably English, but number two, that's good. It says this is sterling. That's what I want to see. That's what I'm looking for. The second mark, and when I say second mark, these are actual individual stamps. So they mark the lion, and then they pick up another punch, and they punch that on it too. This is an entirely separate mark. So they're not necessarily in a row. They may not be even. They may be up and down. But what you will see is you will see a letter. And the letter could be A to Z. And so what the English did is this is called the date mark. And so they took the alphabet, a series of 20 years and 20 letters, and they go through a font. You know what a font is because you got a computer, right? So they'll go through Calibri. And so they'll do all small initials. So they'll go A, B, C, D. And so A in Calibri would be like 1800. B would be 1801. C would be 1802. And so they go through the 20-year cycle. And at the end of the 20 years, they go, okay, we're going to start over. This time we're going to do CAPPs. And we're going to do CAPPs in Gothic. And so there's another 20-year cycle. A, B, C, they go right through it again until they get to the end of the 20-year cycle and they do another font. So this is pretty easy because what you do is you have a book, and the book can be a little tiny book, you know, something like this, or you can get a big encyclopedia and it has tables of the date marks. And so you find the date mark, you look and see the font that it's in. And here's a little tip here. You want to see the shape of the font. Sometimes it looks like a shield. Sometimes it looks like a square box. Sometimes it looks like a circle. That kind of helps a little bit. So you look for the shape, and then you look for the font and that letter. You go to the table, and that table will say, okay, this is 1883. This H in the shield, a capital H in a shield in this font, is 1883. So you want to look for that mark. That's important, and it's going to be on there. It's called the date mark. Then you look for what we call is the town mark. Each town in England, and again, usually we're dealing with big cities, but even the smaller cities had special marks that were assigned to that city. And so each city has a distinctive mark. Now, for example, the city of London has a mark that's called the leopard. And so when you see the shape of a leopard's head on a mark, you know, oh, that was made in London, because London is the leopard mark. Birmingham, England was an anchor. Sheffield had a crown. So each of the big cities, now Dublin was a harp, an Irish harp, okay? And Edinburgh was a castle, the old castle on the hill. So it's like each one of those marks you see refers to the city, and that's the city where the item was made in or assayed in. That's where they went to the town hall and they said, here it is, I'm going to sell this. And they'll say, okay, let's make sure the marks are correct. So it will have the town or city mark on it, which indicates exactly where it came from. I'm not going to get to Sheffield for a second. Sheffield's unique. Then it has a profile of a monarch. We call this the sovereign mark. And it is a kind of like a circle or an oval, and you'll see a portrait, the profile of the English ruler that was sitting on the throne at the time this piece was made or marked. Now that's pretty easy, because the 19th century, almost the entire 19th century, is Queen Victoria. So if you happen to see a profile and it's of a lady, it's Queen Victoria. So, you know, if it's a gentleman looking to the right, it could be George III, George IV, it could be a bunch of them. However, if it's Victoria, bingo, you've got it. Now this should correspond with the date mark. So what we do is we take the sovereign mark, kind of gives you, it zooms in to like a generation, and then the date mark gives you the exact year. Now they don't put the sovereign mark on it anymore. They stopped in 1890. But for 19th century silver, you'll see the monarch mark. Now, that's been, so we've got 4 marks already on an English piece. Now we've got a 5th mark. The 5th mark is, okay, who made this piece? And so each person that made the piece, that the artist, the silversmith, they usually had their initials. So they would have a little monogram or a little font that had their initials on it. And again, these started as early as 1739, and it's called a maker's mark. The one I have on the screen, HB, stands for Hester Bateman. The Batemans were a family of silversmiths, a well-known family of silversmiths in England. And if you see the HB and it's Hester Bateman, that piece is pretty good. Bingo, you got a home run. Okay, it's a nice piece. So you're able to look at these marks. Now, the same thing is you go to a table or an encyclopedia, your reference book, and they have markings of all the makers that through all the years. And so you're able to then look for that mark alphabetically in terms of makers. So now you've got everything. So in England, you know who made the piece, you know the exact year that it was made, you know the exact town it was made, right? You know that it's sterling because it's marked sterling. And what else and if the monarch was still on the throne and it was when they made the monarchs, you know the monarch there. So you pretty much know everything that there's to know about that piece, other than, okay, what is the style of the piece? How nice is it? How well was it executed? What does it weigh? But you know everything else. And when you know everything else, man, that's a big part of the puzzle, knowing that. So on the screen, I've got a series of hallmarks. All of these hallmarks could be on a piece of silver. So let's make sure that you understand. A, it says HW and Company. That's the maker's mark, okay, because it's a series of initials. And we know, and it's kind of in a trademark. So we go, okay, that's the maker, whoever HW and Company was. I can look that up and find that out. B, there is a mark there that looks like a crown. Now I know that the crown is the mark for Sheffield, okay, the city or district of Sheffield, England. It's not Sheffield silver, it's from the town of Sheffield, okay? So I know that. E, in a large capital E, I go, oh, that's the date mark. So I can find the exact year when this piece was made. The most important mark is D, and that is it's the lion. So I know that this is a piece of sterling silver, 92.5% pure. And then E is the sovereign who was on the throne. Now, the sovereign, you see, should match up with C, the letter mark, the date mark. You should be able, that should correspond. If they don't correspond, then guess what? You probably have the wrong date mark. Look at the font a little closer. There are some years that are very similar to others. So, and with age, sometimes the markings wear down, are not very clear. So sometimes you can get confused. So you might have to jump and look for whenever that mark, whenever the capital E comes up, you're might have to look in 2 or 3 places and make sure that it matches the monarch mark. And then you've got it. Now, let's jump back to America, good old America. You remember, we didn't have any standard. So our pieces are not marked sterling early on. If we're lucky, they're going to be marked coin or pure coin, but chances are they're not even going to be marked that. So remember I said that here in America, we kind of were jealous and we wanted to make the people think that our silver was just as good as the English. So some silversmiths and some companies started to mark their silver with what we call pseudo hallmarks, which means they aren't really hallmarks. They don't mean, it's not like English hallmarks. Particularly the area of Baltimore, for some reason, Baltimore was kind of like an area where the silversmiths there chose to use pseudo hallmarks. And they're typical. You'll see, you know, here we have an eagle, or what appears to be an eagle. Now, if you see an eagle, okay, it's American, right? But then we've got the T and the star. They don't mean anything. In other words, they weren't common use markings. It is just a pseudo hallmark. We don't even know if this is silver. We just know it's a pseudo hallmark. I'm going to have to do some more checking. American silver is a little more difficult. However, in the 19th century, again, when we started marking things in America sterling, then the companies, the big companies in America like Gorham, began to create trademarks, and they would mark the silver in America with their trademark. Now, they're very sneaky. When they made their trademarks, they made them imitate English hallmarks. Why? Because they wanted to show that our silver is just as good as those doggone English people. So, for example, the trademark you see on the screen is the trademark for the Gorham Silver Company. What does it consist of? You see a lion there, right? That lion is because it's the lion passant, to mean that it's sterling. It's meant to mean that it's sterling. It is not an American hallmark. The center anchor, that's the Birmingham. So there's a connection with Gorham indicating that in their history, there's something to do with Birmingham, maybe. And then there's the initial, the date initial, which they've used as a G. Well, the G stands for Gorham. It doesn't stand for a specific date. And then they've marked it sterling. The one thing I can say, now this is one mark that goes on. These are not individual hallmarks. That's an indication that it's a trademark rather than individual hallmarks. It says sterling. That's the only thing that's really important here, is the fact that because it's marked sterling, I know that this piece is sterling. It's an American piece, sterling. It's 92.5% pure. Now, when I look at this, though, I automatically know that that's the Gorham trademark. Gorham's trademark did not change much over the years. Other companies did. When I look at this, I immediately know it's Gorham. So when I pick up a piece and I see these three things, you know, the lion, the anchor, and the G, I go, that's a piece of Gorham. I just know it. Well, you get to know this when you work with silver a lot. But there are companies whose trademarks have changed. But all of them, you see, are doing the same thing. They're trying to imitate an English hallmark. For example, the country toll, okay, out of Massachusetts. Now, I don't know if you know what their hallmark is, but it's actually a letter T. It almost looks like an L, but it's a T. And there's a lion standing up in that T, and it's one single mark. That is their trademark. Now, you see what they've done is they've taken a date mark, they've taken a lion mark, and they've incorporated it and said that's the mark for toll. That doesn't mean it's silver. That just means toll made it. They will use that marking on silver plate in addition to silver. Speaking of silver plate, okay, remember when I said Sheffield silver, I kind of quickly went over it. Yes, there is silver made in Sheffield, and silver that's made in Sheffield, England has a crown mark, and it will also be marked with the lion passant because it's sterling silver. But guess what? In the area of Sheffield, which is a big silver area, around let's say 1770, we're just picking a number here, it's close. Around 1770, we don't know whether it was by an accident or whether someone was really experimenting trying to do this. But someone took a piece of copper and they accidentally fused a piece of silver on top of the copper. And guess what? They couldn't get it off. It stuck. And the light bulb went on. It was like, wait a minute. If silver sticks to copper and copper is less expensive than silver, then why can't we make articles out of copper and take those thin pieces of aluminum foil, that's silver that's wrapped up like aluminum foil, and why don't we fuse them to the copper? And when we're done, we'll have an article that looks just like real silver, sterling silver, but it's basically all copper. Bingo. You see, the cost of silver, the cost of the raw material goes down. We can provide silver to the middle class. You don't have to be rich and famous to have silver. And so they began to do this. And so they would hand fuse the silver to a copper base. And they say, what shall we call this? We will call this Sheffield silver, because they did it in the district of Sheffield, England. Now, that was a really, really good thing, because it did provide the middle classes an ability to have nice articles. It looked like silver. It smelled like silver. It felt like silver. It made the neighbors think you had silver. But it wasn't. It was such a very thin coating of silver that this is wonderful. It was wonderful until, guess what? Until you kept using it. And the more you used it, the silver began to rub off because it was so thin. And you begin to serve your coffee or tea out of that, and you look and you go, oh my God, the copper is showing through. They'll know that I'm not rich, I'm not famous. Oh, God forbid. I, I thought I was tricking them, and now they know I thought I was tricking them, you know? And so Sheffield silver was short-lived, not for that reason, but it was like 1780 to 1820, 1830. That was the period of Sheffield silver. And so but it's that hand process. You see, they're making it by hand. They're fusing it on a copper piece that they had to make the copper by hand. So they're fusing the silver onto the copper piece, but it costs significantly less because of the raw material. Now, that's Sheffield silver. It is not silver, okay? You can't scrape the silver off. You can't weigh it down. So Sheffield silver might have markings on it, but it won't have a lion passant on it because it's not silver. It is Sheffield silver. And again, today, we look at this Sheffield silver and we see the copper, the silver wearing down to the copper. And guess what? We love it. Oh, the patina is so nice. It's such an early piece of Sheffield silver. Oh, I am so fortunate to have this piece. It is so valuable. Times change, right? So we love old Sheffield silver today, but it's not silver. And so the word, whenever you hear the word Sheffield silver, it's an oxymoron because it's not really silver, but it's the term that's used. Now, an easy way to find or to identify Sheffield silver is to look at seams. What they've done is they've wrapped that silver around the copper base and they fused it together, and you'll see a seam. Sometimes you'll see a dovetail. You'll see copper wearing. Okay, so that means, okay, this is a piece of Sheffield silver. Now, to get ahead of myself, sometimes Sheffield silver is marked with a number, but the number is usually a 2-digit number rather than a 3-digit number. 92.5 or 925 is a 3-digit number. It means sterling. The number 92 by itself is a 2-digit number. That doesn't mean sterling. That usually means silver plate. So for example, an 84 by itself, if I just saw a mark 84 on a piece and no other markings, I would say, okay, that is probably silver plate. Now, we got to wait till the end because it changes right here in the end. So I'm just telling you right now. Usually, silver plate, if it has a number marking at all, it will be a 2-digit number, unless it's a stock number. People see numbers on pieces all the time. 1702. Okay, that chances are that's a manufacturing stock number. It's not a date number. Of course, in America, you see, in America, about 20 years later, during the Civil War, we had an ingenious guy named William Rogers. And William Rogers basically did what they had done in England, but instead of hand fusing silver to the copper base, he instead dropped it into a bath of silver liquid. He was able to drop the articles made out of either copper or a white metal, some other non-precious metal, drop them into this bath, turn on the juice, and the electric made it stick. Now, that's called electroplating. It is like going to the Dairy Queen and getting a chocolate-covered vanilla cone. They take the vanilla cone, and I don't know how this works because ever since I'm a kid, I couldn't figure this out. They take the vanilla cone and they turn it upside down and stick it in the chocolate, and then they flip it around and curl the top of it, and it never falls out when they're dipping it. But what you do is they hand it to you, and it's like, wow, what a beautiful chocolate cone, until you bite into it, and then it's vanilla. You see, that's electroplating. And the thing with electroplating is they can get so thin. That coating is so thin. It covers it completely, but it is so thin that you are not using you're not using pennies worth of silver when you're able to electroplate something. And of course, the other thing was they were able to do this not just using copper, but they used nickel, silver, white metal, all kinds of base metals. They're able to use them and then electroplate them with that coating. Now, what they have done is all of those processes, you see, they give an acronym. In other words, they take the initials and that tells you what they've done. So EPNS means electroplated nickel silver. It is a piece of nickel that they have coated electrically with silver. EPNS. EPWM, electroplated white metal. They take white metal and they now why would they do that with white metal? Because when it begins to wear, you don't see the copper. It's the same color as the silver. EPC, electroplated copper. Anything that has the EP in it, electroplating, means that it's not going to be silver. And again, when they went to marketing this stuff, it was the Victorian age, the age of excess. And when silver plate came on the scene, let's make everything out of silver plate. You know, households will just grab this stuff up. And believe me, they made anything and everything out of silver plate. Now you want to look for the markings. You see, when I go right to the markings. The markings will tell you usually who made it. And whenever I see Rogers on it, it's almost automatically silver plate. But I see Rogers on it. You see the crown. That crown is supposed to indicate Sheffield. It's just their trademark. And then it says quadruple plate 1212. What in the world is that? Quadruple plate means that it has 4 times the thickness of regular plate. But let me explain that. 4 times 0 is still 0. I mean, electroplate has such a very, very thin coating. They decided, listen, we're going to sell more because we're going to say ours is double plate. So they marked double plate and they shot that electric current through twice. And somebody comes along and says, we'll do one better. We're going to triple plate you. So they turned on that electric juice 3 times. Doom, doom, doom. And I got a triple plated coat. And then to top it off, we're going to do it 4 times. So I've got quadruple plate. 4 times the electric's gone through. I've got a Frankenstein of a piece here. And so when it says quadruple plate, it just means it's 4 times the thickness of 1. But again, 4 times 0 is 0. It doesn't make it more silver. Okay. So when you see any of those standard plate, A1, double plate, triple plate, quadruple plate, it's all silver plate. It's electroplated. Here's another tip. If something is marked Sheffield or Sheffield silver, it's not. Remember, silver made in Sheffield will have the lion passant as well as a crown. Here are imitation. I see all of these markings all the time. These are all silver plated marks. You see, they imitate the good sterling marks. The one on the top, I don't know which company made that, but it's a company trademark. Silver on copper on the bottom. And again, you see those 3 things that are supposed to imitate some kind of English hallmark. EP something in the middle, same thing. EPNS on the right side with a whole series, a bunch of hallmarks there. And then you see the one on the bottom, WNHS. They've taken the person's name and they've made 4 different marks out of it. And then EP means electroplate. These are all silver plate. And of course, these are silver plated examples. Now, these don't have any intrinsic value, but they may have value from an antique point of view. So don't disregard them. See what they say on the bottom. See the company that made them. and get that information, but they're not going to be silver. And again, quickly, the differences between silver and between sterling and silver plate. Sterling is flexible. It is thin. You see, they've added enough, 7.5% of some other metal to make it firm, but it's still going to be flexible, much more flexible than silver plate, which is the opposite. Most of it is a stronger base, and very tiny bit of it is silver coating. Sterling will seem lighter. Silver plate usually seems heavier. Now, again, sterling, you tarnish sterling, you can tarnish silver plate. But when silver plate, when you get into the base metal, you should be able to see what's under there. Again, the sterling will be marked sterling. It will be marked with English hallmarks. It will be marked coin or pure coin. Might have the maker's mark if it's a real early American piece, or it could have a foreign mark, and we haven't talked about foreign, but it could have a foreign mark. If necessary, you can acid test it, but I don't suggest you do that. When you get a piece of flatware, okay, you want to turn it over, and on the back of a piece of flatware, you see down where the blade and the handle come together. Usually it will have your sterling mark right there. So it will probably say sterling, and it will probably have the company. If it's an English piece, it'll have hallmarks on it. The name of the pattern, by the way, on like 20th century pieces, they'll be up on the handle. They usually actually will have it right within the handle to have the name of the pattern, so you can see that. But it will be marked sterling if it's sterling. Of course, some marks are really better than others, and you again use your common sense. A Tiffany mark or a George Jensen mark, not only, yes, they say sterling, but they got a host of other numbers, all of which mean something, by the way, but I won't get into it right now. But when you see a good piece, particularly Tiffany or Jensen, they're going to be marked a little more extensively. They put a lot of information on their pieces. And again, there are other marks on silver. The monograms. The reason this is important, because sometimes the monograms, depending on how you're appraising it for the intended use, sometimes monograms take away from value, and sometimes you have to add to the cost of putting a monogram on value. It depends on what you're doing, but that's appraisal methodology. You don't need to know that. Sometimes the crests or shields or markings on the surface, heraldic crest, that might mean a maker, might mean an owner. And so now we're dealing with provenance in terms of who owned a piece. That could be important. Here are two references that I use on a regular basis. The one on the left is the Book of Old Silver. This is the one that has all the tables in it. So it's got all the English and Scottish tables in it. It's got American names alphabetically. I use that all the time in silver. The one on the right is an encyclopedia of American silver manufacturers. That's really good when again, the reason you need that is because in America, we don't have the marking system that they had in England. And so that's the Dorothy Rainwater book, and that's really helpful. So I would suggest, getting a hold of either one of those two if you can find them. Okay, so quickly, last 5 minutes, I'm going to give you a test. So take a little piece of paper and your pen. Let's see if you've learned anything. Is this an English mark or a US mark? Okay, what you see on the screen there, is this an English or a US silver mark? Should I give you the answer now? I'll give you the answer now.
Good idea, because we're running out of time.
Okay. This is a US mark. This is the Gorham Company. And so that's a Gorham piece, American, and it's marked sterling silver with a Gorham trademark. Okay, number two, is this piece silver or silver plate? Is this piece silver or silver plate? The answer is, it is silver plate. It is not silver. It says silver soldered, but it also says EP, and EP means electroplate. Silver soldered means the very few places on it where they solder sections together, they used a little drip of silver, not enough to worry about. So this is silver plate made by the Gorham Company. Which English mark is this? Okay, now you could, I did mention this early on, you can guess. It looks like 3 castles. So I'm going to guess that it's the city mark. And what city in Great Britain would be marked by castle? It would be Edinburgh. So this is a Scottish piece of silver, and that's the mark for Edinburgh. So it would also have other hallmarks on it, one of which should be the lion passant. What mark is this? This is the date mark. Okay, so it's the letter D, and I can look it up in the letter book, and I can find exactly which year this piece was made. What do these letters mean? Well, I'm not sure what that thing is on the left. And the thing on the right looks like a crown. But I know that EPNS possibly English, but not necessarily. Is this an appropriate mark for silver? It says pearl lith something tax code 9253 blah blah. Now I didn't talk about a lot of silver, you know, Mexico, Germany, I mean each country has their own way of marking silver, but the standard 925 is pretty much the same. At least for what we're doing tonight, you can say it is. This is a piece of Mexican silver, and it is marked 925. That is certainly appropriate for a Mexican piece of silver. They do use the mark 925 for silver. Is this silver? Empire Art Silver. No, this is not silver. This is silver plate. That is a trademark. That is the name of a company, the Empire Art Silver Company. Guaranteed it's a piece of silver plate. How old is this piece? It says pure coin on it. Pure coin is at the beginning of the American, you know, it's like probably around 1800. So this could be anywhere from 1800 to 1840 probably. The L. Forbes and Company on the right was probably not a maker. It was probably the store that sold it. You know, it was like a big department store. It could have been, or it could be a maker, either one. Either one will be marked on the back. And who made that piece? Good old Paul Revere. That's the license plate on his horse. Now, we started out with this at the very beginning. We're going to end with this. Okay. This is, and the reason I said that, this is a piece. You see, it's got the number 84 in it. And that could be, usually 84 is silver plate. However, this also has the mark for St. Petersburg, and it has the maker assay mark. So it's got a city mark and an assay mark. And the 84 in Russia is a Zolnik. And a Zolnik 84 means it is their sterling silver. So if you want to see a piece of good Russian silver, it's probably going to be marked 84. They've got 3 different levels of silver, by the way. 84 is kind of a lower one, but it's equivalent to our sterling silver. So that's a hard one. When you see something like this, that's when you really want to get somebody who knows what they're doing to help you out with the markings. But again, if you knew this at the very beginning, you see, you stuck around and you didn't learn anything else, but I warned you ahead of time. Okay, that's good. Any questions, you can certainly email me. There's my email address. There's my phone number. It's been a pleasure. I hope I've answered some questions. I probably raised more questions than answered. That's life. That's
Don't
good.
don't go away. All right, hang
Okay.
on. We're gonna pick up a few. I got a few things to wrap up with before we call it quits here. Leon, thank you so much. That's just great. Couple of things as we move forward. There's going to be a certificate of attendance. It's an email headed to you shortly, right after this is over. It'll say thanks for attending, and it'll say your certificate of participation or attendance is attached. Give it a long time to download. When I say long, I mean long. Go for a cup of coffee and come back. If you can't download it, email me. My email's on there, and send me that email. I will find a way to download it and make sure I get that to you. We don't mail it out to any of your organizations. This is for you. You want to use it, that's great. That'll work out great. You can watch this webinar anytime. Give me a couple of weeks to get it up on our YouTube channel. Go to the Manuscript Society website. It will be there, and you can watch that and all the other Manuscript Monday webinars that we've done over the years. Thank you to the trustees and staff of the Manuscript Society for making that happen, especially to you for being part of this program. Here's what's coming up in October. Karen Linfimi she's an archivist for the Harding Phillips papers. She's going to do a presentation on the Warren Harding Phillips papers. In essence, love letters back and forth to Warren Harding and someone he shouldn't have been writing love letters to. In November, Dr. Stuart Embry is going to talk about the Tile Club, which are tile creations of famous artists. And I'll get the spelling fixed too. And in December, our good friend Alfred Lemon is going to talk about Spanish Louisiana. Big presentation going on down there. He's going to have all that information for you. If you're not a Manuscript Society member, go to manuscript.org. You can get a lot of information there without being a member. But if you'd like to be a member, and we hope you would be, that's where you go to sign up and be part of it. With that, we're past our 9 o'clock hour. I always say we're going to wrap this up. So unfortunately, we don't have time for questions. You can reach Leon through the email that he sent to you, through the National Appraisal Consultants website, or through the email that you'll get from me when you finish wrapping up. If you have friends that couldn't attend, but they've registered, they're going to get an email that says, sorry, we missed you, and also have the link. So with that, I'd like to say thanks so much for being part of the presentation. Thanks for joining us. Thank you, Leon, so much for being a part of this, and we will catch you next month on Manuscript Monday.